She never planned to buy a bank, not with the last $37 in her account, not with eviction notices on her door. But when a forgotten auctioneer mumbled, "Starting bid, $1, something inside her snapped. One trembling hand went up, and in that instant, a single mom from nowhere became the owner of a century. Old fortress the town swore was cursed. They said the vault had been sealed since the 1970s. They said what was inside was gone forever. But when she turned that rusted key and heard the vault breathe, she realized some secrets don't want to stay buried. The wind cut through the empty streets of Willow Creek like a whisper from another time. Storefronts stood hollow, their broken windows reflecting years of disappointment. The town had once been proud, gold lettering on brick walls, busy sidewalks, laughter echoing from cafes that no longer existed. Now it was just silence and ghosts of what used to be. Mara Ellis pulled her worn coat tighter, clutching a faded flyer in one hand. Citibank of Willow Creek public auction, starting bid, $1. She read it again and again, as if the words might change if she stared long enough. Her fingers were numb, but it wasn't the cold. It was fear, and something else. The kind of trembling that comes when you've got nothing left to lose. Behind her, the small grocery she used to work at sat boarded up, closed permanently, painted across the door in red. 2 weeks since the layoffs. 2 months since her electricity had been cut. And still, she smiled to her little boy that everything would be fine. The courthouse steps were slick with rain when she arrived. A small crowd had gathered, mostly curious onlookers, a few local investors, and a handful of men in suits who never looked twice at women like her. The auctioneer's voice echoed through a cheap megaphone, dull and lifeless. Next on the list, Citibank of Willow Creek, starting bid, $1. A few people laughed under their umbrellas, but Mara didn't. Something about the words $1 cut through her exhaustion like lightning. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was instinct. She didn't even realize her hand was raised until the auctioneer squinted in her direction. Bidder number 9, $1. Any other offers? No one spoke. Not a single soul. The gavel slammed down once, twice. Sold. The sound of that word echoed like a heartbeat inside her chest. Sold. For a moment, she stood frozen, her shoes soaked through, the paper in her hands bleeding ink from the rain. The crowd stared with a mix of pity and disbelief. A single mother from nowhere had just bought a century-old bank that even the town had given up on. By sunset, the paperwork was signed. The county clerk handed her a tarnished brass key with a small tag that read, "Property Transfer Willow Creek Bank." Mara stared at it as if it might vanish. The weight of it felt unreal, like holding someone else's fate. When she stepped outside, the last light of the day painted the town in muted gold. Across the street, the old bank loomed in silence, 2 stories of stone and history, its grand columns cracked but unyielding. The nameplate was still there, though the letters had faded. Willow Creek Trust and Savings EST, 1898. She stood at the curb for a long time, clutching the key, trying to remember the last time she'd owned anything. The streetlights flickered to life, dim and uncertain. The world around her was falling apart, but for the first time in years, something inside her stirred, a fragile spark of purpose. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe it was madness, but it was hers. She crossed the street slowly, rain tapping against her coat, each step heavier than the last. The front doors of the bank were tall and iron, framed, their handles cold to the touch. She slid the key into the lock. It resisted for a moment, as if testing her resolve. Then, with a deep, metallic click, it turned. The sound echoed through the empty street. Mara hesitated. Her breath trembled in the cold air. She looked up at the dark windows above, where no light had shone for decades. Somewhere, a loose sign creaked in the wind, whispering to her like an omen, but she didn't turn back. With one slow push, the doors groaned open, releasing a breath of air that smelled of dust, paper, and time. As she stepped into the shadows, her heartbeat filled the silence. $1, one chance, one secret waiting to wake. And in that moment, Mara Ellis, single mother, survivor, dreamer, crossed the threshold between the life she had and the one she could never have imagined. As the heavy doors closed behind her with a hollow thud, the echo lingered through the marble hall like a whisper of destiny. The story of the vault had just begun. The air inside was thick with dust and memory. Mara stood just beyond the threshold, her breath visible in the dim cold, eyes adjusting to the shadows stretching across the vast marble hall. Each step echoed like a heartbeat against stone walls that had witnessed 100 years of forgotten transactions. Fortunes made and lost. Promises buried in ledgers now crumbling to dust. The floor was littered with fragments of ceiling plaster, curled papers, and shattered glass from a chandelier that had fallen long ago. A single beam of dying daylight slipped through the cracked skylight, catching the gold trim of the teller counters once polished and proud, now dulled by neglect. Mara's footsteps were hesitant but certain, each one echoing her decision. She had bought this place. For $1, for one chance, for a future she didn't yet understand. Behind the counter, drawers hung open, their contents scattered, old coins, receipts, handwritten notes in looping cursive. The scent of mold and iron filled her lungs as she brushed her fingers across the surface of a counter, revealing the faint outlines of where names had once been engraved on brass plates. Mr. Alcott, she whispered, reading a faded label. The name meant nothing, yet it carried a strange weight like she had spoken aloud a ghost. The silence that followed felt alive. Mara took a step back, glancing toward the far wall where two massive steel doors loomed. Their hinges were black with age, their handles shaped like rings meant to be pulled by giants. Above them, in letters carved deep into stone, was a single word, vault. Her heart fluttered. She'd seen bank vaults before, in movies, places of security, of wealth. But this one looked different. It looked ancient, as if it guarded not just money, but time itself. She moved closer, running her hand along the cold metal. Dust shifted beneath her touch, and for a brief moment she thought she felt vibration faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat trapped behind the door. She told herself it was her imagination. Turning away, she noticed the large wooden desk near the center of the hall. It was still upright, its drawers locked, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. She brushed it away with her sleeve, uncovering a black and white photograph in a cracked frame, a group of bankers in pressed suits, standing proudly before the very building she was in now. Their smiles were strange, stiff, controlled. One man in the photo, the tallest, had his hand on a small brass key, holding it up to the camera like a prize. She turned the frame over and found a date scrawled in fading ink. December 1974. Something about that year pulled at her. She didn't know why. Then she saw a small leather-bound book lying half buried under debris near the desk. She picked it up, blowing off the dust, the cover embossed with gold letters, General Ledger, Willow Creek Trust. The pages inside were yellowed, the ink bleeding at the edges. Most entries were ordinary, deposits, withdrawals, balances, but as she flipped toward the final pages, her hand stilled. One line in darker ink, underlined twice, holdings, $300M do not release. Her mouth went dry. $300 million. The handwriting looked rushed, almost panicked, followed by a signature she couldn't quite make out. The entry was dated the same day as the photo, December 1974. She whispered the number again, as if saying it aloud would make it less absurd. 300 million. The sound of her voice vanished into the hollow room. Suddenly, a draft swept through the hall, slamming one of the side doors shut. The sound echoed like thunder. Mara flinched, clutching the ledger to her chest. The silence afterward was suffocating, like the building had just taken a breath. Her pulse raced. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the dark corners beyond the old teller booths. Nothing moved, yet she watched the weight of unseen eyes pressing against her back. "Get a grip," she muttered, forcing a shaky laugh. "It's just an old building." But the air didn't agree. It hummed faintly, the kind of hum that wasn't sound at all, but feeling like standing too close to something alive, something waiting. She closed the ledger and tucked it under her arm. Her hand brushed against the rusted key still in the lock. The sky outside had gone nearly black. Through the cracked skylight, rain began to fall again, slow at first, then heavier, the sound merging with the building's sighs and groans. Mara took one last look around the hall, the cracked marble, the flicker of a fluorescent light struggling to die, the vault looming in silence. This was hers now, all of it. She turned to leave, her reflection catching faintly in the dark glass of the vault door. For a split second, she could have sworn another shadow stood beside her, tall, still watching. She blinked. Gone, her breath fogged the glass. She backed away, shaking her head. Just exhaustion, just nerves. Outside, the rain poured harder. Thunder rolled across the hills. As she stepped out into the storm, the heavy bank doors creaked shut behind her with a slow, echoing finality, like the closing of a chapter, written long before she arrived. Mara clutched the ledger under her coat and hurried toward her car, unaware that the faintest glimmer of light had flickered inside the vault, as if something deep within had just awakened. As the thunder rolled and the rain washed the dust from the marble steps, Mara Ellis drove away aware that her $1 gamble had already set history in motion. The vault was breathing again. Morning crept over Willow Creek like a shy confession. Mist rolled low across the streets, softening the sharp edges of the forgotten town. The rain from the night before had left everything glistening, even the cracks in the pavement catching tiny fragments of light. Mara parked her car in front of the bank, the same brass key heavy in her pocket. For a moment she simply sat there, staring at the building in the pale grey light. It looked even older now, stripped of its mystery, revealing its scars. Yet something about it pulled her, in the way some ruins call to the heart more than palaces ever could. She stepped out, the air still cool and damp, the silence deep enough to hear the tick of her watch. The old sign above the door swayed faintly in the wind, letting out a moan that sounded almost human. Mara unlocked the door and pushed it open. The scent hit her first aged paper, cold iron, dust, and something faintly sweet, like old perfume trapped in stone. The sound of her boots on the marble floor echoed endlessly, bouncing back from unseen corners. It wasn't just empty space, it was listening. Her eyes followed the light spilling through the tall arched windows, catching in broken glass, painting the air in faint prisms. For a moment it was beautiful, haunting, but beautiful. She thought of how many lives had passed through these halls, the bankers, the tellers, the customers clutching checks and secrets. All of them gone now, leaving only whispers. The ledger from last night was tucked under her arm. She'd barely slept, her mind looping around the words she'd found: holdings, $300M, do not release. Maybe it was a clerical error, maybe it was fiction. But the ink was real, and so was the fear that stirred deep in her gut when she read it. She approached the large desk again. The photograph still lay there, cracked glass reflecting her tired face. She traced her finger over the image, over the man holding the key, his eyes forever frozen in black and white arrogance. Behind her, a faint creak. She turned sharply. Nothing. Just shadows. Just air. Her hand gripped the edge of the desk as she whispered under her breath, "Get it together, Mara." But when she looked down again, the photograph had shifted, slightly but enough. It now leaned at a different angle, the man's face tilted toward her, his expression unchanged yet somehow aware. She blinked hard, shaking it off. Sleep deprivation, that's all. She needed proof, something tangible. With her phone flashlight, she moved deeper into the bank past the teller booths, down the hallway lined with faded portraits. The men in the frames seemed to watch her as she passed. Dust coated their glass, but the eyes beneath were sharp, confident, predatory. One frame had fallen, the glass shattered, the plaque half buried in debris. She lifted it gently and brushed away the dust. Richard Alcott, President, 1965-1974. The same name she'd whispered the night before. The same name that haunted the ledger. As she set the frame aside, something metallic glinted behind it. A small latch, hidden in the wall paneling. She knelt, pried it open, and revealed a narrow crawl space no wider than her shoulders. Inside was a thin metal box, tarnished green with age. Her pulse quickened as she pulled it out and opened it. Inside were keys, dozens of them, each with tags bearing numbers and names. Safety deposit keys. One of the tags caught her eye. Vault Subaccess Restricted. Her breath hitched. She held the key up to the faint light. The metal was cold, heavier than it should have been. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky was clear. She glanced toward the vault door again. The steel rings looked even darker now, like unblinking eyes. For a fleeting moment, she swore she saw movement, a flicker of light from within, a reflection that didn't belong. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket, startling her. It was a message from her landlord, final notice. Payment due in 24 hours. She exhaled, leaning against the wall. The world outside was still closing in, even as this one opened beneath her feet. Maybe, she whispered to herself, there's more here than just ghosts. Her voice sounded braver than she felt. The bank seemed to hum again, faintly. A soft vibration ran through the marble under her feet, rising and fading like a sigh. She looked up, dust drifting down from the ceiling, disturbed by something she couldn't see. She turned off her flashlight, letting the silence return. For a long moment she stood there in the dark, letting her eyes adjust, letting her breath slow. Then, with a deep exhale, she whispered, almost as if asking permission. "All right. Let's see what you're hiding." The sound of her footsteps faded into the vast hall as she moved toward the vault, each echo sharper, more deliberate than the last. Behind her, the portraits on the wall seemed to lean just slightly closer, and somewhere deep within the bank, beneath marble and steel, something stirred, faint but real, as if her words had been heard. The vault door loomed like a monument to everything she didn't yet understand. Mara stopped a few feet away, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was full of weight, of questions that felt too loud to ask. She brushed her fingers over the heavy wheel at its center. The metal was slick with years of grime, but beneath it she felt something, almost warm, like the vault remembered being touched. Her phone's light cut across the steel surface, revealing faint engravings she hadn't noticed before, initials etched by hand. R.A. Her heart stuttered. Richard Alcott again. The name from the portrait, from the ledger. A pattern was forming, one she wasn't ready to believe. She glanced down at the small Vault Subaccess key she'd found earlier. Its teeth were strange, jagged, like it had been cut by hand, not machine. On instinct, she crouched, scanning the base of the vault. Near the corner, half hidden beneath debris, she spotted a smaller keyhole almost invisible under decades of dust. Her pulse quickened. She brushed it clean, slid the key in, and turned. A mechanical groan echoed through the hall, deep and ancient. Somewhere inside the wall, gears began to move slow at first, then faster, as if awakening from sleep. Mara stepped back, fear and wonder colliding in her chest. The vault didn't open, but something else did. A panel on the left wall clicked, releasing a narrow seam of air. She pressed against it, and the panel swung open to reveal a hidden stairway descending into darkness. The smell hit her immediately: old paper, oil, something burnt long ago. She hesitated at the top step, gripping the handrail that was cold enough to bite her skin. This wasn't in the blueprints she'd seen at the county office. No mention of a lower level, no record of this passage at all. The air below was thick, humming faintly like an electrical current. Her flashlight wavered as she started down. Each step echoed, slow and deliberate, as the stairwell swallowed the sound behind her. At the bottom, she stepped into a small corridor lined with filing cabinets and shelves, bowing under the weight of forgotten documents. The concrete walls were damp, streaked with rust. She opened one of the drawers. The metal screeched in protest. Inside were folders stamped confidential. She pulled one out and flipped it open. Typed pages, faded blueprints, signatures, words that didn't belong in a small town bank, federal containment program, transfer of assets non-dis, closed beneficiaries. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. She flipped to the final page and saw the same signature again: Richard Alcott. Next to it, the date, December 12, 1974. The same day as the ledger entry. The same day the bank shut down. Mara's mind raced. This wasn't about missing money anymore. This was something buried, something deliberately erased. Her phone vibrated again, the sudden noise slicing through the suffocating quiet. She fumbled to silence it, but the screen had no signal. No message, just static, as if the phone itself was reacting to the place. A faint metallic clang echoed from above somewhere near the vault. Her head snapped upward. The sound came again, once, twice. Then silence. Someone was up there. She turned off her flashlight, heart pounding. The only sound now was her breathing, shallow and uneven. She waited, listening. A slow, deliberate creak of floorboards echoed from above, the kind of sound that comes when someone moves carefully, trying not to be heard. Her throat tightened, then a voice, distant, low, male: Mara Ellis. It came from the direction of the vault. Smooth, confident, like someone who already knew her name. Her heart seized. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Mara. The voice said again, closer now: "You shouldn't be here." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt rooted in concrete. She slowly backed toward the stairs, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The voice echoed once more, soft, almost regretful this time. "Some doors are meant to stay closed." The stairwell seemed to darken around her as she climbed, the air thicker with each step. When she reached the top and burst into the main hall, the vault stood silent again, the same unmoving giant of steel and shadow. No one there, no footprints, nothing. Just the sound of her own breath, ragged and cold. Mara clutched the file to her chest, staring at the vault with wide, trembling eyes. The rain outside had started again, its rhythm faint against the glass windows, like fingers tapping a warning. Whatever she had uncovered wasn't a secret meant for her to find. But it was too late. Because the moment she'd turned that key, the moment those gears had moved, something buried beneath decades of silence had heard her name. As lightning flashed through the skylight, the reflection of a man's silhouette appeared across the vault door, tall, still, and gone by the time she turned. The marble hall fell quiet again, but the echoes had only just begun. The storm had passed, but Willow Creek didn't feel any lighter. The sky hung low and gray, like the clouds were too heavy to move on. The streets were slick, puddles mirroring the hollow windows of old buildings that seemed to lean closer now, as if listening. Mara parked in front of the bank again. She shouldn't have come back so soon, but sleep hadn't found her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the vault, that faint pulse of light from within, the whisper of a voice calling her name. She told herself it was stress, exhaustion, imagination, but deep down she knew better. When she stepped out of the car, a man across the street lowered his newspaper. His gaze followed her, calm and deliberate. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched. Mara turned the key in the bank's door and slipped inside, shutting it behind her quickly. The metallic thud echoed through the marble hall. Inside, it was colder than yesterday. The air smelled faintly of ozone and rust. Her footsteps echoed sharper this time, the sound brittle like breaking glass. She noticed the ledger she'd left on the counter wasn't where she'd put it. Someone had moved it. She froze. The photograph of Richard Alcott still sat in its frame, but now it lay face down. Her pulse spiked. She looked around, calling out softly, "Hello." Only her voice came back, fractured and hollow. A drip echoed from the corner of the room. She followed it, her boots crunching across the debris. Water leaked from a pipe above, collecting in a small puddle that reflected the ceiling light. But in the reflection, something moved, just for a second, a shadow that didn't match her own. Mara stepped back, her breathing quickened. The silence was broken by the squeak of the front door hinges. She turned sharply. Too late. A man stood at the entrance, grey suit, black umbrella dripping rainwater onto the marble. His face calm, almost expressionless, like he had rehearsed it for years. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, voice low and composed, "I believe you've come into possession of a property that doesn't rightfully belong to you." Her mouth went dry. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "Just someone who prefers old buildings to stay closed." He stepped forward, his shoes echoing in rhythm with hers as she instinctively backed away. The air seemed to thicken between them. "Do you know what's inside that vault?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, and I don't care, I bought this place legally." "That may be," he replied, brushing dust from his sleeve, "but legality and ownership are not always the same thing." He stopped beside the vault door, resting one hand against the cold steel. This was sealed for a reason. People who tried to open it before you disappeared. Mara stared, unsure if he was threatening or warning her. The man glanced back at her with eyes that didn't blink often. "Some things are locked not to keep people out, but to keep something in." He slipped a card onto the counter, turned, and walked out without another word. The door clicked softly shut behind him. Mara picked up the card. No name, just a single embossed line, Crane and Associates Private Trust Oversight. She exhaled, realizing only now how fast her heart was racing. Outside, she caught a glimpse of him through the window, still walking, still unhurried, until he turned the corner and vanished into the fog. For a long moment she stood there in silence, card in one hand, ledger in the other. And then, behind her, the sound, a soft, deliberate creak of the vault wheel turning. She spun around. The handle moved half an inch on its own before freezing. The faint hum in the air returned, deeper now, almost like breathing. Mara's voice trembled. "Who's there?" No answer, only that pulse, the vault's heartbeat, steady and patient. She stared at it, frozen, until a single word formed in her mind. Not a sound she heard, but a feeling, cold and precise. Watched. Her hand went to the light switch, flicking it off. Darkness swallowed the room, but in that darkness the vault door seemed to glow faintly, a pale shimmer like moonlight on water. She backed toward the exit, her breath shallow, the card from the stranger still clutched in her fist. When she finally stepped out into the open air, She realized every window on the opposite side of the street now had someone standing behind it, motionless, watching. And as the door closed behind her, the sound of the vault's heartbeat followed her into the night. The watchers had found her, and whether they were living or not, Mara Ellis was now part of their story. The next morning came without light, a pale, washed-out dawn that felt more like the world had forgotten to wake up. Mara sat at her kitchen table, the card from the man in the grey suit resting beside her untouched cup of coffee. She hadn't slept. Every sound through the night, the wind against the siding, the creak of floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator felt amplified, like the walls themselves were listening. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that vault wheel turning by itself. Slow, deliberate, alive. The name on the card haunted her. Crane and Associates Private Trust Oversight. No address, no number, no logo. Just those words, carved into the cardstock like a warning. By mid-morning, she drove into town. The streets were quieter than usual. When she stopped for gas, the clerk, a weathered man with a beard as grey as the sky, stared at her for a long moment before saying softly, "You bought the bank, didn't you?" Mara hesitated. "Yeah. Why?" The man's gaze flicked toward the distant building at the edge of Main Street. "That place. It's not right, hasn't been since they shut it down. You should leave it be." She frowned. What happened to the people who worked there? The man didn't answer at first. He just wiped his hands on a rag and looked out the window like he was remembering something that shouldn't be remembered. "They say the last owner vanished, locked himself inside one night and never came out. Next morning the doors were sealed from the inside. No body, no note, just gone." Mara's breath caught. Richard Alcott. The man's head turned sharply. "You know that name?" She nodded slowly. "It's written all over that place." He shook his head and lowered his voice. "Then you'd best stay away from the vault. They say that's where it started, where it still listens." A chill ran through her spine. She thanked him quietly and left, the sound of the bell above the door echoing behind her longer than it should have. When she reached the bank again, the sky had shifted into a dim silver haze. She stood outside, hand resting on the cold metal of the front door, trying to steady her breath. The air felt different today, denser, like a storm that hadn't quite decided if it would break. Inside, the hall was darker, colder. The lingering smell of dust was mixed with something new, faint cigarette smoke. Someone had been here recently. Mara moved cautiously through the lobby, her eyes sweeping the shadows. Nothing seemed disturbed, but on the counter where she'd left the ledger, there was a folded note. She opened it, one line, written in careful, slanted handwriting. "You're sitting on something that was never yours." Her hand shook as she looked around, but there was no one, just silence. She turned toward the vault. For a moment it almost looked different, the surface darker, smoother, like fresh steel instead of rusted iron. She approached slowly, her heartbeat sinking with the faint vibration she could feel through the floor. She pressed her ear to the door. A low hum pulsed through it, not mechanical, not electrical, rhythmic, almost like breath. Mara staggered back, fear crawling under her skin. "No," she whispered. "It's just the air, just the echo." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself. The sound deepened, and for the briefest second, she thought she heard whispering so soft it could have been the wind. Then her phone rang. The sudden noise nearly sent it from her hands. She fumbled to answer it. "Hello?" Static filled the line. Then, faintly, a voice, "Leave the vault alone." Her breath froze. "Who is this?" No response. Only static. Then a sharp click as the call ended. The signal icon on her phone flickered full bars, then nothing. She stared at the screen, her reflection pale and trembling in the glass. Something was happening in Willow Creek. something buried too deep to stay silent. She looked once more toward the vault, the ancient door standing like a sentinel between worlds, and she realized with cold certainty that every step she took inside this building was being watched, not just by someone, but by something. The sound of the vault's hum rose again, deeper this time. She turned to leave, her boots striking against the marble in quick, frightened rhythm. But as she reached the door, her eyes caught the reflection in the glass one last time, a figure standing by the vault, hands clasped behind its back, watching her go. When she turned around, the hall was empty. Outside, the wind carried whispers through the empty streets. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaked open, then slowly shut again. The watchers weren't gone, they had only just begun to move. The wind over Willow Creek carried a different sound that morning, not the restless sigh of a dying town, but something heavier, more aware. It moved through the broken alleys and empty storefronts like a whisper searching for ears. Mara stood once again before the old bank, clutching the key she'd found hidden behind the portrait of Richard Alcott. Her fingers trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was something older, a sense that she was being drawn back here for a reason she couldn't name. The events of the last 2 days replayed in her mind, the man in the gray suit, the phone call that came from nowhere, the message that had appeared without footsteps. None of it made sense, but the vault did. It was the only thing that felt real now. Inside, the bank waited like a cathedral of silence. The light filtering through the tall windows was pale, ghostly, painting streaks across the cracked marble floor. Dust drifted through the air like tiny constellations. She walked toward the vault, her footsteps slower than before, careful, deliberate. Every sound echoed longer than it should have, like the building itself was breathing with her. The vault door towered before her, a monument of iron and secrets. She set her palm against it, feeling the vibration again, faint, rhythmic, alive. For the first time, she whispered into the silence, "What are you?" Her voice bounced off the walls, then faded. Nothing answered. She crouched near the base of the vault, where the smaller keyhole hid beneath layers of grime. She took out the subaccess key, the one she'd found days ago in the hidden box, and pressed it in. It turned more easily this time. A deep mechanical click resonated through the marble, followed by a slow, grinding sound from somewhere beneath the floor. Mara stepped back, watching as the air shifted. The dust began to stir, swirling in spirals around her feet, drawn toward the vault as if by unseen gravity. The hum grew louder, no longer faint, but steady, pulsing. The temperature dropped. Her breath turned white in front of her. A hairline crack appeared along the side of the vault door, barely visible at first, releasing a hiss of cold air that smelled of iron, paper, and time. Her flashlight flickered, then went out. For a long moment there was only the sound of the vault, that strange, rhythmic breathing in and out, slow and deliberate, like something alive behind steel. Mara's heart raced, her instincts screamed to leave, but her curiosity anchored her in place. She leaned closer, tracing the crack with her fingers. The steel was freezing, yet pulsing like skin over something immense. A sudden thud echoed from inside, one, then another. Heavy, deliberate strikes against the door, as if someone or something was on the other side, testing its prison. Mara stumbled back, hand over her mouth. Her flashlight sputtered back to life, its beam shaking across the door. The noise stopped instantly, the hum faded, the air stilled. She stood frozen, the silence pressing in so thick it felt physical. Then from the darkness came a faint whisper, not from the vault, but behind her, Mara. She spun around, light slicing through empty air. No one there. Her voice trembled. "Who's there?" The light landed on the ledger she'd left on the floor. Its pages were open, fluttering though there was no wind. On one page, words had appeared faint at first, then darkening as if written by an invisible hand. "It's not yours to open."